So yes, thank you. My name is Sean Reif. I'm one of the co-founders of scite, and as Igor mentioned, I'm also a university professor at Murray State University in the United States. So I've have sort of hand both in scite and in academic research and teaching. So hopefully this is an informational call for everyone. I'll just start out by briefly talking about what I think are some of the fairly common problems that academics tend to face. For example, keeping up with the latest developments in your field or subfield, keeping up with how your research has been received. Is it being well received? Is it being replicated? Are people challenging sort of key theoretical paradigms that you're working in? How can you find replicable, reliable, high quality research and separate that from the lower quality research? I think certainly something that everyone is probably familiar with is just the sheer amount of research that is published every year. Depending on your area, that could be hundreds or thousands of papers that you feel like you might need to read in a given year. I certainly, my background is in social psychology, and I am constantly feeling like without the help of some very important tools that scite provides, I would be kind of lost in terms of knowing what I need to read to keep up with my area of research. What are some hot topics that are being actively debated in my field? So what are more contentious claims? How can I make sure that when I am writing, I'm citing quality research that's not been retracted, that's been replicated, it's been well received? As a professor, how do I decide what papers to assign as readings to my undergraduate students and graduate students? And then how do I familiarize myself with a new area that I'm not formally trained in, or a new technique or a new tool? I could probably have 6 or 7 slides that have additional items on this. But scite is really a tool that I think can help tremendously alleviate some of the pain points that we see in a lot of these issues. The thing I like to point out is that scite is made for researchers by researchers. So everyone in our company who designed this product, who founded this product, has a background in academia, has a PhD. So we understand a lot of these pain points. We were founded in 2018, and our headquarters is in New York, but we have team members all over the world. And we have about 130,000 scientists, researchers, and industry experts who are now using scite in ways that really fundamentally change the way they do research. So I'll take a few minutes here, and in just 1 second, I'll show you some of the really core products that we offer. But I'll start out by just telling a little personal story here. This is a younger and probably thinner version of myself. This is me when I was in my first year of graduate school. I had moved and joined a new institution, East Tennessee State University, to study something that I was very interested in, but really knew relatively little about, and that was stigma. Particularly perceived stigma and social support. So if you have some background in the social sciences, this is a huge literature that spans medicine, psychiatry, psychology, sociology, social work. It's really an enormous amount of material. And I had some hints of what I needed to read in order to familiarize myself with that literature. But it was unfortunately really too much to manage. So this was back in 2006. This was prior to the really well-developed tools that I think some of us are familiar with, like Google Scholar, which has been around now for quite some time. So one of the first things that I did when I got to graduate school was I wrote a little script that would basically use the university database and pull down results and find the articles that were highly cited in that database. a very sort of earlier version of Scite. Of course, the disadvantage there is that it was only showing me what the highly cited articles for a given search term were. And Scite really hopes to go beyond that mere citation count. But this is an idea that has sort of been decades, I think, in the making. Now, if you think about what you get when you do a typical search, so this is just a search, for example, from Google Scholar for long COVID. Google Scholar does what it attempts to do reasonably well. And it will show you, for example, if you search for a term like long COVID, it will show you some relevant pieces of information. But it's really just showing you, for example, in terms of where papers sit relative to one another, it's really only showing you the highly cited papers. That's better than nothing. But we think it's important to actually go beyond this. And it's especially important when you're searching for a topic that has, in this case, over 160,000 results. And keep in mind, this is the term long COVID is not a term that has been around for a long time. It's really only in the past few years that people have been writing about this, and already we have over 160,000 papers to sort through. So what we try to do is go beyond mere citation counts and show users what citations say about a paper. And there are two ways that we do that, and I'll show you in detail what that means in just one second. But really just sort of noting, I think, a thing that most of us intuitively understand, which is that a citation count is not a terribly useful or necessarily terribly informative piece of information unless you understand what people are actually saying, what's embedded in those citation counts. So Scite collects data from a number of different sources. We collect data from metadata publishers. We collect data from publishers themselves. We collect data through open access software. And we extract citations from from the published scientific literature. And this breaks down across biology, medicine, computer science, psychology, sociology, really across the spectrum of scientific fields. So we have very good coverage, and we have licensing agreements with most major publishers. I'll take a minute here and now go ahead and get into a demonstration of the product itself. So I'll start out by just showing one of my own papers. This is a paper that I wrote when I was finishing up graduate school. And as I said, I was in social psychology, so finishing my PhD. And one of the things that I noticed was that people were starting to collect data over social media. They were starting to recruit human subjects over social media like Facebook, and in some cases actually running experiments or running questionnaires over Facebook. And this raised some concerns with me and some of my collaborators. So we did some initial research to just look at how personality differs by modality of data collection, including Facebook. And if you look at this landing page, you'll see a number of things that I think are common to most article landing pages. So some metadata, the abstract of the paper. And Taylor and Francis tries to do this this bit here, where they have a list of papers that cite my work. And if they found 66 of them, and if you wanted to, you could go through and look at each of those papers, find the citation to my work, and then see what those folks are saying about my paper. And you might do this for just strictly for vanity purposes, right? You want to know what people are saying about your work. But I think it's also, in a much more pragmatic sense, it's a very useful way of keeping tabs on what's going on in the area that you study, is by seeing what other people are saying about your publications. And that's what Scite is trying to do. So if you pull up the article page, the report page for that same paper on Scite, you'll notice that we have a lot of the same bits of information. So you have some metadata, the title, author information, a link to the full text. But what makes Scite different is in this section here on the bottom right. So this is showing you information not from my paper itself, but from papers that cite my paper. So this is text that Scite has extracted through our partnerships and our licensing agreements with publishers and open access sources of data that we have then ingested into our database and analyzed. So it will show you that we have 78 publications where we have found citations to this work. And from those publications, we have full text citation statements from 43 of them. So we've been able to extract data from 43 citation statements. We also have another key point. Again, if you look at this, report page, you'll see a lot of things that are common to scholarly database tools. So, for example, being able to order by search relevance, newest versus oldest. You can filter results by date or by the type of publication. So articles or books or other types of like preprints, white papers, that kind of thing. But one thing that we do in addition that I think is kind of unique is we are able to filter and classify citations by citation type. So we have a deep learning algorithm, some AI, that will actually look at the text of a citation statement and classify it as being one of 3 types of citations that we've identified. So for example, this statement here, extending previous findings, e.g. Rife et al., we found significant differences in the observed distributions of demographics and personality traits. This is someone who has found something that's more or less consistent with what I found. So we call that a supporting citation. On the other side of the coin, you have contrasting citations. This is folks who either failed to replicate a given finding. So, they've said, for example, inconsistent with Rife's work or in contrast to Rife's work. And then the highest category in this case is mentioning citations. That's someone who is not necessarily making a valenced statement about my work in any way. They're simply just mentioning it in passing. And for this paper, the usual cases, people have done some data collection through social media and want to talk about the implications of that. And so that's the way that they're citing my work. Now, of course, I'm as a social scientist, I have a lot of experience in that area, but it is simply the case that we have work in a lot of other scientific fields. So I'll bring up some additional examples here. This is an article from the journal Cell. Getting into the field of biology here. Again, listing some relevant metadata. Sorry, it's taking a second to load here. This is actually a fairly, what we call a fairly highly cited report. So it'll take a second for it to compile all of the various items. Going back to it, we do have a lot of coverage from a wide variety of articles. In fact, biology is our most populous or most numerous category. But we also have a good coverage in computer science and physics, chemistry, medicine, and of course, social sciences like economics, psychology, et cetera. Give it one more second here. There we go. So this is a paper that has been highly cited. It's cited by over 7,000 separate publications. And as you can see, we have citation statements extracted from the majority of them. One thing that I have to point out is that we extract multiple citations statements from every paper. So in this case, you can see we actually have 7,195 separate publications, but from those 7,000 publications, we've extracted 7,700 separate citation statements. So for example, this is a citation to this paper in Cell. It's about stem cells. And you'll notice that we have citations from this later paper in 2012. And this later paper actually has 4 separate citation statements, so 4 separate references to this article. And so they're all kind of grouped together in this box. And also present here, you can tell we have some metadata that I think is relevant. You have corrections and errata to this particular paper. And in fact, if you go to the report page for this paper, you'll see that that is featured prominently at the top. One thing that we've tried to do in-house is really surface and make really visible works that have been retracted or withdrawn. It's actually, in my capacity as director of research, we've looked at the way that withdrawn or retracted works are often cited. Sometimes they're cited for perfectly good reasons, like talking about the reason why a paper was cited or was retracted or withdrawn. But sometimes it's evident that people are citing a paper not knowing that it had been withdrawn or retracted. So that kind of metadata we think of as being quite important, and we try to emphasize that. You can see we also, when a work has been retracted, we try to surface that fairly obviously. And we have some in-house methods of actually detecting retracted works. The extent to which people actually cite retracted work seemingly not knowing that it's retracted is actually fairly astounding. In fact, we have a little Twitter bot that I created that will point out papers that cite retracted works after they've been retracted, and it has a lot of fun with that. So, okay, so again, you can do some additional filtering with these types of reports. Let me go back to, where was I? Oh, I hit it back here. You can do a lot of sort of common filtering with this type of work. So again, a lot of the things that you would normally expect, such as citing or breaking it up by year, so the date in which a paper was published. But because Scite has those licensing agreements, we're able to also filter by other things, such as the section of a paper that a citation occurs. So for example, is it in the introduction? Is it in the discussion? And we can break that down in a fairly granular way based on how people are citing. And of course, you know, if you can assume that if a paper's been cited in an introduction, maybe it's a key piece of theory or background research. Or if it's in the results, maybe it's an important piece of contrasting evidence. We think of that as an important sort of filtering mechanism. We also have the ability to identify things like self-citations. So, you know, if someone is building a body of research, if they're building a line of research that's, you know, that's sort of iteratively building on itself, they might have a fairly high number of, for example, self-citations, and you can filter by that as well. Another thing that I like to point out is what we call high engagement papers. So this is a paper on apoptosis. Sorry, I'm not a biologist, so my pronunciation may be a bit off. But this is a highly cited paper. But one thing that Scite makes evident through its classifications and citation types is the fact that this is a paper that apparently is fairly heavily contested. So you've got a fair number of supporting citations, that is to say, folks who have replicated this work or found results that are consistent with this work. But you also have a fairly high number of contrasting citations. If you have experience in bibliometrics, for example, you might be aware that there are you know, sort of negatively or negative citations. What we call contrasting citations is the least common category. This is a ratio of the number of overall citations is actually fairly high. So we would call this an area of active research or of active debate on this topic, just based on the ways in which this paper has been cited. Okay, so in addition to the report page, we have a number of features that I think are quite useful that I wanted to point out. So we have the ability, as do most tools sort of this type of information discovery and filtering, content curation, we have a search feature. And this is something that we've worked on a lot since we were founded to really sort of contest with the best. So this is a feature now that I use all the time in my research. We have the ability with Scite to search in multiple ways. So the first and most direct is simply looking for metadata. So this is a search for hypertension and beta blockers. So a common treatment for hypertension being the prescription of a type of beta blocker. And this will just look at the metadata for given papers that have as keywords hypertension and beta blockers. And it'll just pull up those results based on that metadata. You can also filter these results by those citation types that I mentioned earlier. So if you want to, say, find research that has a good number of supporting citations, let's say we just want to see some papers that have at least 10 supporting citations, well, you can do that. Or if you want to see maybe, like I mentioned, some high engagement areas on this topic, you can actually request that, hey, only show me papers that have 5 or more contrasting citations and 10 or more supporting citations. So this is a way that I actually use when I teach courses. I'll usually, if it's an area that I'm maybe not actively reading in for a more general class that I teach, I'll look for topics that have been receiving contrasting and supporting citations more recently. And often those are the papers that I read from, for me as a professor teaching, as well as papers that I might actually assign to my students because those are hot topics in that given area. We also, again, this is something that sort of makes Scite unique. We have the ability to do searches of citation statements themselves. So you can actually search not just the metadata and the keywords and the abstract, but you can actually search for citation statements in the full text of the article. And again, this is something that is unique to Scite because of our relationships with publishers and licensing groups with publishing groups. So that will give you a more in-depth investigation of how those terms appear in the scientific literature. But one thing, and you can filter by the numerous different fields that I think we would expect. So the authors in a given search for a given search term, the year in which a paper was published, the sections that a citation appeared in, the affiliation of the authors. So if you're, I'll get into what we call our dashboards in a minute. But if you want to filter for just results at a certain institution, you can do that. Or if you say you only want sort of research that appears in journals that are focused on biology or medicine, it'll allow you to filter by those terms as well. The new thing that we recently introduced as a feature of our search facility is what we call this Ask a Question feature. So, for example, if you are not an expert in a given area, one of the challenging things is what search terms to use. So this is for example, I might want to know how common are peanut allergies? I'm sure that there's a sophisticated biology term for peanut allergies or medical term for peanut allergies that I'm unaware of. Oh, sorry, hang on one second. It looks like it has not pulled up my new search. Let's see. We'll try that once more. There we go. So if you can pose a question using this tool in natural language, and our system will go through the scientific literature and come up with an answer after parsing the natural language of that question. We'll give it 1 second to pull up. One thing that I have to point out, some of you may have been following the recent developments in natural language processing and things like ChatGPT. So one of the things that GPT-3 and ChatGPT has become rather notorious for is the fact that it very often provides wrong answers to questions like this, which is, people have been sort of sharing various screenshots of ChatGPT just coming up with just hilariously wrong answers to this kind of thing. And there's actually a very good reason for that. That's because ChatGPT is not designed or trained in a way that emphasizes coming up with correct answers, is emphasizing coming up with answers that look like they were written by a human being. And that's really its sole purpose. At Scite, we've designed our algorithm to give answers that are both informative and accurate. So in our Ask a Question feature, this answer summary is posed in natural language, but it's natural language that is generated based on the scientific literature. So what I like to say is that if the answer that it's giving is incorrect, it's because the peer-reviewed scientific literature is also incorrect. And in order to drive that point home, in coming up with this answer to my question, how common are peanut allergies, it is giving me an answer summary, but it's also showing me the references, showing me the citations, showing me the full text that it's used to come up with that answer. So you can kind of check its work, which is something that rather famously you can't do, for example, with ChatGPT. And again, that's because we've designed it to come up with friendly answers, but also answers that are correct. As a final point, we also, if you're familiar with, I don't know what institutional subscription your various libraries have, but one common thing is the ability to compose fairly sophisticated search queries using Boolean logic. So, for example, I might be interested in going back to our earlier example of hypertension and beta blockers. Maybe I'm interested in papers that reference hypertension. And we have our Boolean operator here, and beta blockers. But maybe I also want to maybe add in their age. And I'll go ahead and just, oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing here. And I'm sort of just on a personal level, I am on beta blockers and I have hypertension and I'm getting older. So here we go, something of personal relevance. This will give you the ability to compose that Boolean logic query in a fairly straightforward manner that I think a lot of other platforms have implemented in terms of just adding in the various terms. And then once it pulls up the search results, you'll be able to, again, apply that to either both citation statements and papers, or one or the other. So this is a set of results that would be consistent with a lot of other platforms, whereas the citation statements would be the full text of the citations. Okay. An additional feature that we can get out of our search facility, sometimes what you need is not a really in-depth sort of investigation into a given topic. What you want is a sort of surface level analysis of some key variables, such as hypertension, beta blockers as a treatment, and their relationship with age. So one feature that we've built into our search facility is the ability to generate what we call a scite analysis. So any set of search terms, anytime you do a search in scite, scite will generate for you what we call a scite report. So this will just basically analyze all of the citation statements from a given search query and give you a sort of breakdown of the research on that area. So it will tell you things like the most highly cited publication on that topic. It will show you when research on that topic began and how long it has continued. It will show you sort of a graphical breakdown of what citations appear over time. So, for example, within given year ranges. It will also identify researchers who have published what we think of as reliable research. So this is research that's not been retracted, that has received a fair number of supporting citations. So it will break down sort of key people who seem to be doing quality research on this topic. Publishing either the most work or the highly supported work. It will also identify key institutions. So you can, if you want to know, all right, who is doing sort of the most research or the most visible, most reliable research on beta blockers as a treatment for hypertension, you can break that down to institutions where that research is coming from. And then it ends by giving you some key citations or some key text on that topic. So this is what we just call insights from the most relevant papers, as well as the most recently published and the most recently supported papers. That is to say, papers that have received at least some supporting citations after they were published. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, it will surface any kind of comment or errata or retraction notice on the papers that it cited. And in this case, you'll see we have some, the most contrasted papers have also had some errata published about them, presumably because that was maybe some work that wasn't quite ready for prime time, so to speak. And finally, if this is something you just sort of need to take with you, you can actually export that as a PDF and print it out, save it locally for reading later. Okay. So let me go back here real quick. An additional thing that we provide is what we call dashboards. Dashboards are a quick way of really assessing a certain set of published articles. So, for example, you can create a dashboard. Actually, I'll go back here. If we wanted to, we could create a dashboard with our search results from hypertension, beta blockers, and age. If you just click on that, it'll go ahead and import the papers from our search results into what we call a dashboard. But you can also just take an arbitrary list of DOIs. So our system, anything with a DOI, it knows about. So if you have a list of DOIs, you can create a dashboard based on that. So, for example, a set of DOIs that I've collected before on the Higgs boson, and I just have a list of DOIs that I've exported from other software. I can just copy and paste that into this text box here, and then create a summary of those papers based on scite's data. And importantly, actually, is you can actually directly import your research from reference managing software like Zotero or Mendeley, as well as upload a CSV file. So like you could export from Excel of an arbitrary list of DOIs. So we try to make sure that we are sort of friendly to all the different ways that all the different tools that researchers use. So once you submit this list of DOIs, this is on our topic of the Higgs boson, it will come up with a summary of all of those papers based on scite's smart citation data. So in that list of DOIs, it will give us a breakdown of the citation types. It will also tell us about any editorial notices. And it will give us what we call the scite index. So the scite index is basically the number of supporting cites divided by the combination of the number of supporting cites plus contrasting citations. And so this is just sort of an omnibus number that tells you, all right, how reliable is the research that I'm looking at? In this case, from the 613 DOIs that I provided the system with. And it will compute by default a 5-year average scite index for those articles. And it can map them out by time. It can also identify the most prominent authors on a given topic and surface them, and give you a breakdown of the papers that you supplied it with. So this is giving you the titles of every article in your DOI list. It will allow you to sort that results by the number of supporting, contrasting, and mentioning citations to a given paper. And it will do that for every item in our DOI list. In addition to getting a dashboard based on an arbitrary list of DOIs, we also have the ability to create a dashboard based on organizations. So you can actually use the scite tool to look up your institution. So I'll go ahead and I'll just pull up dashboard or report pages for institutions that I believe are represented here. So Charles University, Salesian University. And this will report we'll come up with a summary page that very much like the one we just saw. It'll show you the scite index that I described before for each of these institutions. It will break down the authors at each of these institutions. And then just like the example I showed earlier, it will show you the supporting, contrasting, and mentioning citations for the papers that are affiliated or associated with each of those institutions. We do this actually not just for organizations in our database. We also do it for journals. So if you're looking around trying to decide where to submit a paper and want journals that are publishing reliable research, scite is a good way, we think, of finding that. And again, it'll show you that breakdown for each of the institutions, both over time as well as within a sort of list of either 2-year or 5-year scite index. Now, one of the things that we also do is we give you the ability to pull up an author summary. So we have the ability to extract author information from folks who have published in our data set, and we have the ability to summarize their work. Oh, there we go. So it will pull up for this scientist, Peter Cotes. It will give you their affiliations, as well as give you a list of papers that we have identified him as being an author of. And for every one of those papers, so you can click on and get the full report, but we also summarize how that paper has been cited by others. So you can generate profiles of key opinion leaders or key scientists in a given area of scholarship. So that's a little bit of a sort of a different format, but it's giving you the same kind of thing that I was talking about earlier with dashboards, in the sense that you can get a sort of a quick summary of a person's work. Okay. I do want to make sure that we have time for some questions, so I'll try to wrap up here in a few more minutes. There are a couple of additional features that I wanted to get into. One, and this is getting back to what I talked about earlier. One thing that I think a lot of us struggle with is how to keep up with research in our respective fields. One way that scite can help with this is through scite alerts. So alerts, if you've used, you may have used similar products from other providers that will give you an alert. It'll maybe email you or otherwise contact you anytime a paper is published on a given topic. So you can do that with keywords through various products. You can do that. I get emails from like you might get them from like Google Scholar. We do that with scite. You can do that based on a search term. So for example, again, I'm a social psychologist, and I teach and do some research on psychology of politics and morality. So one common topic in my area is what's called moral dumbfounding. So you can see I have scite alerts set up for that term. But I also, and this is unique to scite, we have the ability to alert me anytime a given researcher has published or been cited. So anytime Jesse Graham gets a citation, I get an alert. Or for a given paper. So anytime this paper, which is sort of a seminal paper in my area, anytime that receives a new citation, I get an alert based on that. And in my work as a university professor, this has been, I'm pretty much wholly reliant on this feature now, because when I teach my course on the psychology of politics and morality, one of the things that I do every semester that I teach that class is I will go through and say, all right, here is this seminal paper, who has cited it in recent years since the last time I taught this class, and how have they cited it? Have there been more contrasting citations since the last time I taught this course? And that's one way that I've actually been building my reading lists every time I teach that class. In fact, there are a couple of important papers that I would not have known about otherwise that have now really changed the way that I talk about this particular, the theory that's outlined in this paper. So for just to say, I'm a bit more skeptical of it than I was initially. And that is a development in my work as a professor that wouldn't have happened were it not for scite. Okay. So that alerts feature is really important in terms of the ability to keep up with the latest research on a given topic. A final thing that I will go over just real quick, because I do want to make time for some questions. If you're writing a paper, we've talked about different features that scite has from the perspective of needing to read research, but as researchers, our job is not just to read research, it's to actually write and produce research. So we have some features that help in that writing process, and one of the key features in that area is what we call our reference check feature. So for what reference check does, oops, hang on a second, just go to the checkout example. There we go. What the reference check feature does is it will allow you to upload a PDF or a docx file, so a Word document. It will take that file and it will analyze it and extract the citations and the references from that PDF or docx file. And that paper will then generate a report, what we call a reference check report, and it will identify maybe some potentially problematic references. So in this example, we have a reference check report that is citing some retracted work, and it will give you a big sort of red flag there. Again, there may be reasons to cite retracted work, such as talking about why it was retracted, but it may also be the case that users don't know that a work was retracted. So it will highlight that. And it will also break down your reference list and show you how things that you're referencing in your paper have themselves been cited. So it will give you the total number of citations, the supporting, mentioning, and contrasting citations for everything in your reference list. And this is a thing that I now do whenever I'm writing a paper. Is a thing that I do now when my graduate students are writing their thesis. I run it through reference check. It's also a part of my work as a reviewer. So if I'm sent a paper for review, for peer review, this is one of the sort of health checks that I'll give that paper. And in fact, one of the things that I have played around with and have done sort of by habit is getting this reference check report. I'll look and just say, all right, if it's good. It's not reciting anything retracted. It's citing work that seems to have been fairly widely supported. But for example, if I look at this year published range and I see that, they haven't cited anything in the past 10 years, that's a really good sort of obvious indicator that, well, maybe we need to revisit this literature again before we're ready to publish. So something as simple as the year in which a paper was published can, I think, be informative as part of that review process. Okay, there are additional features that I'll just sort of give a brief shout out to. So we have a browser extension, so a browser plugin that will basically sort of sit in the right side of your browser window, and when you're on an article page, it will pull up a little icon that will show you the citation type counts for that paper. It will, and then if you click on that, it'll take you to the scite report page. We also have plugins for both Zotero and Mendeley. And we have the ability to, I didn't get a chance to really talk about this in a lot of detail, but we have the ability to visualize how citation or how a paper is being cited. So if you go to this visualize citations feature here, it will give you a sort of cool little graph image. If you're more of a visual person, you would like to see just sort of how a given paper is cited by others or what it's citing, we can visualize that as well. Okay. I think that we are about out of time for the formal webinar. Again, I want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So let me just spend a moment here and go through our question list. I really appreciate everyone's questions. Yes. So Tom, yes. So we integrate with Zotero. Hang on, let me pull up Zotero here. Let me see here. Oh, wait, my Zotero is not working. Shoot. Sorry, y'all. I'm not going to be able to actually show it. But yes, we have a Zotero plugin. For some reason, my Zotero is not cooperating today. But yes, you can basically take through our plugin with Zotero. So our plugin with Zotero will show you the number of citations in each category in the main window there. And it will also allow you to export a list of papers from Zotero and just upload it to our dashboard feature, and it will create a summary of those papers. So yes, the short answer to your question, Tom, is yes, it will allow you to do that. See, make a list of papers, send it to Zotero to use that with MS Word to create a list of the literature. Yes. So what I would say there is you can actually, if you go to that report page, hang on, I've lost my report. We'll go back to my my arbitrary list of DOIs here. There we go. What you can actually do if you want to have something you can say copy and paste into another piece of software, you can export that list as either an RIS or a CSV file, and then use that to create, say, a table or a summary in Microsoft Word, Google Docs, whatever your favorite piece of software is. Okay, hope that answers your question, Tom. Let's see. Question about from Christina, within citation statements, is a search performed only within the sentence with the citation in the entire paragraph or the okay, right. So this is about Christina is wondering, like, how is that search targeting a given piece of in the literature? So we actually we focus on the text of the citation itself, but we actually have data from not just that sentence, but also the sentence before it and the sentence after it. So all of that is data that we're able to run the search on. And I can't remember the exact number, but it does weight by the text of the citation sentence itself. So that's usually, if you do that citation statement search, that's what it will highlight. In our internal research, we found that that tends to be where the most informative stuff tends to be. So I hope that answers your question, Christina. To say, to show the mainstreamness or non-negligibility cited outsiders. I'm going to mispronounce your name. I'm sorry, Jerry. If you could maybe clarify what you meant. I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but I don't want to ignore you. So if you could maybe clarify what you mean.
Okay, you partially answered in your comments about analysis of citations, but when I entered a completely unknown field or field where I don't know too much, it will be extremely positive for me and extremely helpful to have a map of the field with the clouds of, say, one cloud, which is the biggest, this mainstream opinion on that field, and maybe some groups which are opposing. And do you have some systematic method how to see such kind of map?
Yeah, so what I would probably the way I would approach that would actually be using our citation statement search, or the what we call the ask a question feature, and then just using the search results, filtering the search results as a way of sort of identifying work that's sort of highly supported or highly contrasted. That would be that would be the way I would do it. In terms, and then of course, if you wanted sort of a visual map of that, you could also visually, take one of those key papers that you had maybe identified with the search feature, and one of the highly cited, highly contrasted, or highly supporting papers, and create that visualization. Would be a good way of doing that if you wanted, sort of like you were talking about a map. I think that might that would be sort of that would be the way I would do it. So yeah, hopefully that that clarifies that. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Each journal uses a reference list formatted in a different format. Right. Okay. Yeah. So again, it's connected with Zotero, so you can do that interoperability. We also have the ability, I mentioned it earlier, the ability to export those dashboards to an RIS file, which is cross-compatible with a lot of different reference management software. So if you've got your favorite reference management software that isn't Zotero or Mendeley, usually it will be compatible with either a CSV or a .ris file. So you should be able to do it that way. And as Igor pointed out, you can also do those summaries by ORCID as well. Lucia, great question. How reliable is the AI? So earlier, Igor actually pasted a link to a paper in Quantitative Social Sciences. I'll just repost it here in case everyone can make sure everyone can find it. That is the paper where we lay out in technical terms the reliability of our algorithms, the precision and recall. We're very proud of it. As those of you who have experience in this area know, it's a very a tough job to come up with those categories and to assign them to assign new text to each category. We've spent years refining this model. It's based on just in short, it's based on annotations from 60,000 papers. So we have a fairly large training data set, and we've also spent years refining our implementation of the model itself. So we're quite proud of it. We think it does a very good job. But one thing that I should point out is that if you are reading one of these reports and you say, that's classified as supporting, but I don't think that's supporting. If you click on these three dots over here, you can actually flag the classification and say, hey, yeah, I think this is actually a contrasting statement. And then we have a system on our end that will allow, that will request review from two separate users. So two separate people will look at that and say, yep, that one was wrong. And then that information also gets folded back into our model. So the idea is that our product and our model will get better over time as we get new annotations from users themselves. Let's see. So coverage. Let's see. Well, we used to have a table for this, and I'm not going to be able to find it at the moment. But yes, we have, I think, very good comparable coverage to Web of Science and Scopus. And we actually, because we have those licensing agreements and the ability to analyze the full text, we have a lot of things, a lot of features that they aren't able to offer. I don't have on the top of my head like a direct percentage-wise comparison, but I can find that for you if you want to talk about that later. I think we're running out of time here. I'll just real quick say, yeah, if you want your journal to be included, just email hi@scite.ai and we can set that up for you. We're always eager to include new journals.
Sean,
yes.
Before you finish on that one,
Please.
I actually wanted to say to everybody that if you have an institutional repository or a publishing house or whatever source of DOI'd papers, journals, whatever, we can ingest it into Scite for free. And we could also provide badges that are live on millions of papers, also for free to those of you who wish to do that win-win relationship. So that's how we partner with publishers. Thank you. Over to you, back.
Yeah, no, thank you, Igor. I appreciate you mentioning that. Okay, I think that we are out of time. I don't want to keep anyone any longer. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I'm Sean at scite.ai, or you can reach out to Igor. We're both happy to answer any questions and help you all use Scite in your own scholarship. And I really appreciate everyone making the time. Vladimir, thank you for setting this up. It was great. Appreciate it.
Vladimir, would you like to finish it up as usual? Thanks, Sean.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Sean and Igor. Thank you everyone for joining. I just wanted to mention that we can do trial or test access for an institution. Preferably if you can request that via your library or any other body that would coordinate then the trial so that it gets promoted to other researchers at your institutions, institution, etc. We'll happily do that. If you have any other questions, you can write directly to Igor or Sean. You can also write to myself or to my colleagues in Slovakia. I hope you can see their emails and our emails on screen right now. Thanks once again. Have a good afternoon and evening. And we hope to hear back from you. How did you like scite? Thank you.
Thank you.